It's Wednesday morning, January 4th. We are in a lull of a battery of what they call atmospheric river storms. There is some breeze. It's not as windy as the weather forecasts have warned us about, but it's still foreboding. And actually, the water level, this is the Sacramento River, the water level has dropped about 2 feet since yesterday. It looks like the bridge is in peril, but it's dropped. That means that we are safe for now. We feel safe for the long run. We know that we have gotten a lot of messages on social media, and we've received personal messages, people from outside of Sacramento curious and concerned for our safety. The Sacramento area has done a lot over the last century and a half to keep us fairly high and dry. We're standing on one of those things, a levee built sufficiently high so far to keep the river from spreading over into the city. And the levee that we're standing on is a big part of what saved this city during another terrible storm, 1861-62, which has a lot of the earmarks of the current storm. But we're safe. So we're standing on the levee. There's a concrete seawall that's been built. This is a remnant of the seawall. But in order to save what's downstream, there are a lot of measures in place. One of those is a series of gates about 2 miles up the river called a weir. Those gates have been opened, and the water from the upper Sacramento is being shunted west into what we call the Yolo Causeway. And it's a flat area in good weather. It's beautiful for rice growing. In weather like now, it becomes a wide, shallow lake and a perfect resting spot for the migrating birds on the Pacific Flyway. So they love it right now. So that water is flowing furiously to the west, so furiously, in fact, that for a time when they do open those gates, the water that's flowing out of the American River into the Sacramento, about a mile from where we are, actually flows north and heads toward those gates as the water draws out. It doesn't happen constantly, but there is that phenomenon where the water goes upriver. So we're in good shape. We're just watching the water go by. I'll show you in a bit that the Delta King, the last remaining steamboat on the Sacramento River, is riding high because of the weather. During the 2017 storm, which was fiercer on the Sacramento River, at least so far, than this, swelled the river much higher. I remember doing my morning duties of opening up spaces for the tour program, and out of the corner of my eye I saw a building off to the river, which hadn't been there before, and I looked, and it was the Delta King. And the Delta King, now you can walk right across the gangplank. Most days you have to walk down, and in 2017 the gangplank was a climb. So that is a good measuring stick for how high the water has gone. The top decks are usually at the level of where we're standing on the normal day in Sacramento, if there is such thing as a normal day. We're in what's called the hollow sidewalk, evidence of how Sacramento famously saved itself. I won't go into too much detail because I really do want you to take the underground tours and hear from an historical figure about what happened. But this is the wall holding up the street, which was done first generally, and then the buildings were lifted. So this is what's known as the hollow sidewalk. It's essentially a workspace for the workers, but this wall holds up the street. And here's evidence that we are still mindful of what storms can do to the city. You can see water, or you should be able to see water seeping through the cracks from the street, going through the gutter, but some of it is overspilling onto the ancient brick walls. The concrete here and the metal rebar are ways that the 20th century Sacramento made sure that the streets were safe, but the brick remains to show us what they did in the 1860s. We are beneath the Hall Lewis and Company building. 139 years ago this week, we would have heard commotion upstairs because this was the opening week of this grand building. This was the basement, and this was not lifted. This was built after the lifting occurred. In time, over the next few months or so, this dirt will probably get dark, rich black because we're very close to the level of the river now, and the water is naturally seeping underneath and will soak up this dirt. We in Sacramento are saved in large part by not only the weirs, but flood control basins throughout the city and the county. Kids play on those flood control basins because in dry times they're often soccer fields. Now, south of us, Dillard Road on Highway 99, that highway was closed for a few days because of the flooding of the Cosumnes River, one of the last undammed rivers coming west. And with the battery of storms coming, of course, that's a concern. Some private levees broke. That is the vigil that Sacramento has accepted over the last century and a half, is fixing these levees. The government agencies and private enterprises are constantly reinforcing these levees. Much of them are just dirt, and so they are vulnerable. Others are reinforced inside with concrete, metal, those sorts of things. So even though we're high and dry now, Sacramento is always mindful of the coming storms. That includes the big storm to come. The U.S. Geological Survey talks of the ARC storm. That's an acronym. It stands for atmospheric river. Those are the first two letters. The storms we've gotten in at least the last decade are these very heavy, wet atmospheric river storms, and this is one right now. The K in that acronym stands for 1,000 times magnitude. So the scientists are predicting that the storms of 1861, 62 will show up again. And so we must be ready. But we're always reminded that because of the many disasters that befell Sacramento, fires and flood, Sacramento rose like a phoenix out of the muddy ashes and used the term that is now used by the Sacramento Republic professional soccer team, Urbs Indomita. We are the indomitable city.